Hey folks, Chuck Holton here. I'm in Panama, and I read an article today that was talking about the number of migrants coming into Panama has dropped precipitously over the last couple of months. From an average last year of about 2,400 people a day crossing through the Darien Gap into Panama illegally, to now, in January of this year, 142 a day is the average. So what's to blame for this incredible drop? Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that. Let's just go through the numbers. The demographics have shifted tremendously since last year. Last year, the vast majority of people coming through the Darien Gap were Haitians. Now it's Venezuelans. Why is that? Well, a couple things. First of all, Venezuelans used to skip the gap by just flying right to Mexico, but now Mexico has instituted policies that will keep the Venezuelans from being able to do that because they have to have a visa to come in through the airport. So since they can't come in through the airport, they're walking through the Darien Gap. That's a much longer trip for sure, and a much more dangerous and arduous trip, but they are doing it. They're coming in that way. The other thing is that the reinstitution of Title 42, the Remain in Mexico policy, even though the Biden administration has done everything it can to keep from enforcing that rule, that Remain in Mexico policy, the Supreme Court mandated that they have to enforce it. And so even though they're still dragging their feet and they're finding all kinds of reasons to make exceptions and let people through, the upshot is that people know that there's a good chance that they're not going to be allowed in. They're going to be stuck in Mexico for a long period of time, and they don't want to do that. They don't want to live in Mexico. They want to go to the United States. And so since they can't get to the United States, they're not even trying to go now. They're all going to Chile. The reason that there aren't a ton of Haitians coming into into Panama right now, is because the Haitians were not coming out of Haiti. All those Haitians coming through the Darien Gap, they were coming from Chile and Peru and Ecuador and Brazil. They had been down there since the Trump administration instituted Title 42 the first time. And they knew they couldn't get into the United States. They didn't want to live in Mexico, so they stayed in Chile, which is their next best option. Now, the Haitians are staying in Chile once again. And there are, as I've been reporting, if you've been watching the podcast, there are tons of migrants from Venezuela who are going to Chile as well. So it just goes to show that that government policy does have a large effect on the number of migrants that Panama or the United States will see coming across their borders. Now, Panama said they spent about $45 million last year on feeding, housing, and giving medical care to these migrants. So this should be a savings for them, but it's still expensive, and they could do a lot more. With better government policy, they could stop more people from coming. But I want to show you a video from my friend Todd Bensman, who has been with me a lot, traveling around Latin America, doing research on migration. He was just down in Tapachula, Mexico, where I've been 3 times last year, interviewing migrants about how they are able to afford the time that it takes to go through Mexico, get your visa. A lot of them have to spend months there. And I want you to hear what he found down there on the border. He found that the United Nations, using American taxpayer dollars, is giving money to these migrants in order to facilitate their movement to the United States. So American citizens are paying indirectly for this migration crisis, and that needs to stop. That means we need to call our Congress critters and our senators and let them know that this is unacceptable. Check this out.
Thank you for inviting me here to discuss the most historic mass migration crisis ever to have stricken the United States. What has happened at the southern border is not only history-making in scope, but will have long-lasting second, third, and fourth order implications for American citizens. Therefore, the great mass migration that began on or about Inauguration Day 2021 profoundly qualifies for a broader public discussion about how to address it. That takes comprehension as to what it is and how it works. During its first year and now into its second, I have interviewed hundreds of the immigrants, most recently on an 8-day fact-finding journey to the Guatemala-Mexico border city of Tapachula. From my vantage point, I can confidently report that there is but one root cause that they, the immigrating foreign nationals, most often cite for coming now. It is that President Joe Biden opened the American southern border wide to them. They see over their cell phone, social media, many hundreds of thousands who have gone before secure quick releases and resettlement into America, the ultimate golden chalice. And they decide to also gamble huge smuggling fee investments that criminal smuggling gangs will get them in to stay too. With such an enticing, motivating return on smuggling investment, no thinking person should wonder why this global migration hit the all-time national record of nearly 2 million Border Patrol apprehensions in a single year, with probably 500,000 more gotaways, and that's an undercount. But the caucus should also know that nonprofit advocacy groups, and more notably the United Nations, appear to be working side by side with the criminal smuggling organizations on the very same mission. United Nations agencies such as the International Office of Migration, IOM, and the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, are providing hard cash, food, shelter, legal services, psychological services all along the migrant trails, which also materially facilitate journeys that everyone involved very well knows, despite any protestations to the contrary, always lead to an illegal American border crossing. In whatever small or large way the United Nations and the nonprofits it funnels money to can reasonably be said to contribute to the current mass migration crisis. I found my first clue on a Rio Grande riverbank on the Mexican side, a discarded UNHCR stamped booklet advising detail IOM hand out cash debit cards to migrants in long, snaking lines. The workers handing them out said they give $400 every 15 days to families of 4, renewable every 2 weeks. The UN tells me only the most vulnerable get this cash. But in Reynosa, and again most recently in Tapachula, Mexico, where I saw the same long lines at the UNHCR office, nothing about them indicated acute vulnerability. They were regular family units of the sort crossing by the tens of thousands right now. Some showed me their debit cards there too and said, were it not for this money, they might have to leave the migrant trail and go home. Further inquiry showed the cards are just part of a vast and sharply escalating UN program called cash-based interventions, all along the migrant trail through Latin America. According to the UN documents and migrants, these include the unrestricted, unconditionally usable plastic cash cards, but also cash-filled envelopes in some areas. Never a good look, cash-filled envelopes. Money transfers for lodging, pharmaceutical prescriptions, and something called movement assistance, which means transportation money to move forward when camps empty and reform further north. Credible reporting shows that the UN is providing these forms of assistance all along the migrant trail, from South America to Texas. On a Cucuta to Bogota, Colombia segment, the UN was seen handing out food, clothing, and necessities worth an estimated $200 to $300 a day per migrant. And then there's important non-cash assistance keeping migrants on the U.S. trail. In Tapachula, approval for Mexican asylum these days is important for permission to move legally beyond the southern provinces where I was, always to the U.S. border, of course. But many coming in from Guatemala innocently tell Mexican immigration they're going for U.S. jobs, which is not an eligible asylum claim. So they get denied. But I found a UN-funded solution recently. The manager of a UN-funded migrant advocacy center told me a full-time staff of certified psychologists help these migrants recover repressed memories of more eligible government persecution. This manager told me in a recorded conversation that his group also trains migrants on the front end of the process how to pass muster with Mexican asylum interviewers the first time around. He said these operations produce a 90% success rate for thousands a year. Other UN-funded psychologists offer what sounds like similar work. If all this is true, the UNHCR in Mexico has found another way to keep thousands more on the trail over the American border. Many can and will defend this UN assistance as life-saving, but others who learn of it reasonably interpret this in a very different way, and they want to know more, of course. However Americans want to interpret this assistance to migrants, they undoubtedly know they are joining a historic mass migration. All Americans deserve to know the full extent of it because the United States is the UN's largest donor, and the U.S. Congress appropriates a huge amount of money to the UN every year. Thank you. I also would mention that the border is a national security concern. Just recently, I was able to report that a Venezuelan crossed the Rio Grande from Matamoros to Brownsville, and that the FBI wanted that FBI watch-listed individual held, and that ICE headquarters here in Washington, D.C. intervened and demanded that he be ordered that he be cut loose because he might get COVID in detention. That individual is now living freely, pursuing an asylum claim in Detroit. Thank you.
All right, folks, that's all I got for today. Thanks for watching The Hot Zone. Like and share this podcast, please. Share it with your friends. Share it on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. And if you want to support the podcast, go to chuckholton.locals.com and support us there. Thanks a lot. See you later.